So today is primary day in New York and also Colorado. Actually, Lauren Boebert is going to be on the ballot, maybe losing her primary. But the one that most people are focused on is in New York, Jamaal Bowman versus Westchester County Executive George Latimer. We can put this up on the screen. A lot of this race hinges on Jamaal Bowman's pro-Palestinian stances, his increasingly vocal stance, which is interesting, I'll get into in a moment, and the massive flood of money into this race, which is making it literally the most expensive congressional primary in history. Dan Marins has a look at some of the underlying dynamics here. That's an interesting read. He says it's not just AIPAC, how Jamaal Bowman alienated voters who once supported him. So you guys may recall the way Jamaal Bowman originally was able to win this seat was also in a Democratic primary. He took out Eliot Engel. Now, Engel had been a stalwart ally of the pro-Israel crowd. He was, top recipient of AIPAC funding. He was, really staunch on that point. And Jamaal Bowman at that point was trying to take sort of the liberal Zionist position, the sort of more moderate J Street style positioning there. I think perhaps he hadn't really thought all that much about the issue. He was trying to just say the things that Democrats typically say to try to appease everyone. He wins that seat. It was in the context of the Black Lives Matter protests. Eliot Engel had gotten caught on a hot mic. You remember the Saagar?
Yes, of course.
Saying basically the only reason I'm here is because I'm up for re-election.
Right.
He was never in the district. He took it for granted. And so Jamaal Bowman is able to win. The district has always been a little bit difficult for him because it is a combination of, there's a part of the Bronx in there that's very diverse working class. There are other diverse working class neighborhoods in the district. There's also a significant area of affluent suburban liberals and a significant Jewish vote as well. So there were a lot of lingering bad feelings among those for whom Israel is their number one issue about Jamaal Bowman taking out Eliot Engel. And then post-October 7th, when Jamaal Bowman emerges as one of the most vocal congresspeople in service of the Palestinian cause and, not going along with all of these resolutions that are being passed through Congress, et cetera, he ends up with a giant target on his back. And his opponent, Westchester County Executive George Latimer, who is, very sort of centrist right-leaning. Doesn't want to raise, he's really running on I won't raise anyone's taxes, including the billionaires. He's taking 100% of the AIPAC line, et cetera. He's also a really well-known figure in Westchester County because he's been a local politician there. So those are some of the dynamics. We can go ahead and put this, or what do we have next? Is it the tear sheet or the SOT that we have next? Oh, we've got a little taste of some of how Jamaal Bowman has been talking about the funding that's been going into this race. He and George Latimer in one of their debates, he was talking about how AIPAC has been, funding his opponent, et cetera. Let's take a listen to how that exchange went.
The wealthy, and particularly for my opponent's campaign, billionaire Republicans are buying our democracy. The reason why our democracy doesn't work for working class people and the majority of the American people is because of big money in politics. He is running a big money campaign. They're spending more money in this race to get me out than they have ever spent in their history, meaning AIPAC. More money than they have ever spent in their history.
That sounds like a dog whistle to me.
It's a one-issue special interest. Their issue, according to Politico, is Israel.
Correct.
Yeah, so
let me, I think I still had time on the clock.
Yeah.
Good.
So their one issue is Israel, not Mount Vernon, not the Bronx, not New Rochelle, not Portchester, not White Plains, not Tuckahoe, Israel. And they recruited him to run against me. And they're spending more money in this race than they have ever spent in their history. Why? Because I'm fighting against the genocide in Gaza and because I'm speaking up for black and brown people here. We should not be sending billions of dollars to another country to commit genocide while we are struggling to live day to day right here in this district.
Thank you.
I mean, I agree with him, but you can see there he doesn't hedge. She calls it a genocide, and there's a lot that's interesting about this, Saagar. So first of all, AIPAC has put in some $15 million into this race, which is astonishing. And most of the ads they're running, by the way, don't have anything to do with Israel. But They obviously prefer George Latimer over Jamaal Bowman. So what they've gone with and what Latimer has gone with is this idea that Jamaal Bowman is all talk and no substance, and Latimer is this like technocratic executive who's going to be actually able to, work the levers of power and deliver for the district. So that's the dynamics of the campaign. One of the things that's really interesting with Jamaal Bowman is, as I was saying before, when he was first running, it seems like I don't know that he had a really well-formed opinion on the issue.
You and I interviewed him at the time. He was kind of all over the place.
I mean, he just, it was sort of like very typical. And there's a lot of new politicians who are like this. They just haven't thought all that much about it. They don't know all that much about it. So he gets into office and he agrees to go on a trip to Israel that was sponsored by J Street. Now, J Street is meant to be the like liberal Zionist alternative to AIPAC.
Yes.
So they're not as hardline, they're not as right wing, they're in favor of a two-state solution, but they're still Zionist. So he decides to go on this trip, and actually at the time it was a big like thing on the left. The DSA was very upset about the fact he was going on this trip, et cetera. But as it turns out, according to his own telling, actually going to Israel and seeing the reality and meeting with these young Palestinian students, actually visualizing and experiencing the reality of the apartheid system there and how some places are just, off limits if you're not Jewish, off limits certainly if you're Palestinian, that actually really changed his view and even made him feel like, this nonsense we've been fed about the two-state solution, how this is an ongoing process, like this is a fantasy. So the more that he came in contact with the reality of what Israel is today, not just the sort of like top line talking points that liberals have been speaking to for years and years and years in the absence of like an actual desire among the Israeli government to pursue any sort of a peace, once he actually had exposure to that, it hardened him in terms of his pro-Palestinian positions and made it so he's not just a liberal Zionist now, it's shifted him to really being an anti-Zionist, and he speaks about that now and has a lot of sort of moral force. So, the bottom line here is he's very, very, very likely to lose today. We've got the New York Times article we can put up on the screen here. AIPAC unleashes record $14.5 million in a bid to defeat Jamaal Bowman, critic of Israel. The delusion outside spending, they say, also includes another $1 million from a different pro-Israel group. There have been some other groups that have come in on Jamaal Bowman's side, but obviously can't even come close to matching that amount of money. This is AIPAC also making good on their promise to unleash $100 million to take out and punish anyone who is a critic of their pro-Israel policies. So, they really want to make an example of him, and I think they have a very good chance to do it. Let's put this up on the screen from Ryan. This is the latest poll, and it has Jamaal Bowman losing badly to George Latimer, 48-31, and that polling has shifted. There's limited polling in the context of a primary, but what we've seen, it has shifted dramatically since that AIPAC money has come in.
Definitely. Friend of the show, Dan Marins, in the Huffington Post, in his write-up, though, he did say that Bowman has kind of been not at odds with the district, but he gave himself an opening that October 7th was going to be exploited. So they talk about that vote against the bipartisan infrastructure bill back in 2021, which is very important to people in New York because of various tax breaks hidden within there, thanks to Chuck Schumer. They also talk apparently here about that pulling of the fire alarm. A lot of people were very embarrassed about that entire situation. They say, and this is he has a quote here from a chair of the Democratic Committee who actually was a Bowman donor as recently as January. And he said, he had been frustrated with Bowman's failure to follow through on efforts apparently to arrange conversations, quote, with her rabbi and other Jewish friends, as well as his July 2023 decision not to attend Israeli President Isaac Herzog's speech to Congress, which Bowman, as you said, cited his previous Israeli visit as reason for not doing so.
And
so
Herzog is the one who said there were no uninvolved civilians.
With the Mehdi Hassan interview, which was after October 7th. What Marins writes in the piece is basically, you have the fire alarm thing. You already had some previous just like annoyance with these like normie liberal Democrats, and then Israel poured gasoline on the fire and gave all the money in the world to anybody who wanted to exploit that. You put all of that together and you've got the perfect storm to be able to kick him out of office.
Yeah, and I always appreciate Dan's writing, and I think the piece is worth reading. But I will say that, if you just look at the polling and the way it's moved since the money came in, like clearly the AIPAC money has been very significant part of this race. And it's also really clear, I mean, from the way AIPAC has positioned itself and some of the races they've got involved in, Dan seems to suggest that if Jamaal Bowman had just moderated a little bit on Israel, he may have placated them, and I just don't buy that because we saw them come in, for example, to a race in California where the person who was running, whose name I'm blanking on, he'd been a little bit critical of Benjamin Netanyahu, but he was pro-Israel. Like, he was on all of the talking points, but they still, because they were worried about him dissenting even a little bit, they still put millions into that race to try to defeat him. And so Jamaal Bowman had already said enough that I think there was, if you don't go along with every single thing that they want, they know George Latimer is going to do everything, and they already were upset that he had taken out Elliot Engel. So I don't think that there was a space for him to position himself. There just isn't, at this point, the sort of positioning of a quote unquote liberal Zionist, it really isn't possible anymore. It's just that space is gone because we've all been faced with too much of the reality of what Israel is, what it does, the way it lies, the way it oppresses, the occupation, the way the occupation has expanded under every Israeli administration, whether they were right-wing or quote-unquote moderate or not. So, to me, what was interesting is that Jamaal Bowman, the more that he came in contact with that reality, the more his position shifted against, what had been the liberal Zionist sort of standard talking points. And you see this, the stance with Joe Biden, where he's kind of in no man's land, still trying to parrot the liberal Zionist position when it doesn't really make sense to anyone. It's become very binary. You're either, against what I see and what Jamaal Bowman and others see as a genocide, or you're not. So I don't know that there was like a middle ground that he could have occupied that would have kept AIPAC out of this race, which is why people like John Fetterman, when he was looking to keep AIPAC and their affiliated or allied super PACs out of the race, he just went to them and was like, tell me what I need to say, literally, according to Ryan Graham. And that's the only way that you can get away with it, is you're just literally like, I will sub out my Israel policy to you. I will do 100% of what you say. If there's even like a hint of independent thinking or daylight, forget it. They want you gone.
I don't think it's it's a smart political strategy here, obviously, especially with the constituents that you've got. It's like the perfect storm. And look, in general, it was a problem for him. It always was. We'll see how things go, but it's not looking good. Yeah. It's not looking good.
Yeah, I think would be a massive, listen, crazier things have happened, but I think it would be a massive.
It would be crazy if he wins. I will say,
what
media-wise,
well, and what a blow to AIPAC would that be?
God, it would be shocking.
Yeah.
I will say, I was telling you guys, I was at the gym yesterday and somebody random asked me, they go, hey, who is that congressman who can bench 405? That is Jamaal Bowman. So maybe he is winning over the critical bodybuilder demographic. They're like, that's all I need to know about it.
It was crazy.
I'm just saying, there are a lot of bros out there who are impressed. He did 3 reps, 405, decent form. I'm impressed.
Yeah,
color me impressed.
Completely. I don't know that much about. I know that that's a lot of weight, but people were saying this is like he's like in the top 0.5% of like power lifters.
I would put it this way: if you're not juicing and you're able to do that naturally, that is shocking. So I always thought, no offense, I thought he was fat, but now after seeing that, I'm like, no, he's got that powerlifting body.
Yeah,
he's got the meat and he's got the muscle. So respect where it's deserved.
Yeah. Well, last thing I'll say on this before we move on to what's going on in Ukraine is just, Jamaal Bowman is not stupid. I'm sure he knew that this was going to be an issue for him in this race. He knows his district. He knows, I think there's about 150,000 Jewish people. Now, Jewish people aren't a monolith, right? They don't all see the things the way that AIPAC does. However, there's also a class divide among Jewish people that we've seen as well. However, the Jewish people in his district are predominantly relatively affluent. And he knew this was an issue, right? And he said genocide, and he, called into question some of the lies and the propaganda, and he's been very outspoken. He's taken votes that I'm sure he knew were going to be a problem for him, and he deserves credit for it. Like, that is actual political courage. I'm sure he knew he was risking his seat when he was taking those votes, and so I just want to say I appreciate that, I respect it, and we'll see what happens for him tonight. For AIPAC, if they lose, oh boy, that would be devastating for them.
It would actually be nuts.
If they win, it's they're successfully really demonstrating once again that you are punished if you dissent from their line on Israel. And that's really their goal here, is to, put a target on his back, to make an example of him, to show they've got the muscle to prevail in, at least in certain places in the country.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.